Hello and welcome back to the Property Investors Handbook podcast. In today's episode, we're delving into a critical topic of property inspections. Now, these inspections are not just a routine check, they are pivotal in maintaining the value of your investment and ensuring tenant compliance. Now, to explore this topic, we've got a very special guest in the studio today, Lachlan Sutherland from Sutherland's Property Management. Welcome to the studio, Loch.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Now, look, Lachlan, it's great to have you here because you're the expert at these property inspections and do most of them for Sutherland's Property Management. So, look, can you start by explaining maybe the importance of having a regular property inspection for a rental property?
Well, I mean, expert could be a stretch, but I'll give it my best
it?
shot.
You'll take it?
The importance of doing rental inspections, I guess there are two main factors to doing it. One is to make sure that the tenant is looking after the property, pretty standard.
Yep.
And two is to just keep an eye on things that might degrade in the property, which is something that I think people forget about, especially if properties have been fitted with like cheaper outlets, appliances, fittings, fixtures. Just keeping an eye on that because it can end up costing landlords more down the track if you're not keeping an eye on
those.
What might be on its way out.
Sure, because I think that's probably what most people sort of think. It's all about checking up on the tenant and making sure they're keeping everything spick and span and, aren't doing the wrong thing. But it's just as important to be, checking for things that need to be looked at and upgraded, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We see things like tapware that ends up degrading from rust or calcium buildup, and then that can cause all sorts of plumbing issues down the track. So just keeping an eye on those things as well as the tenant. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So what are the key elements or the things you go in looking for then during inspection? What have you got your eyes open for?
Well, one thing that we've really been keeping an eye out for the last couple of years because it's been so wet and rainy is water damage.
Okay. Mold even?
Yeah, mold as well, particularly on ceilings because, how often are you always looking up to check what's going on your ceiling? So it's things like that because that will obviously have further ramifications down the track. It could mean that there's a leak in the roof, in the ceiling, in the walls of the house, and so that's one thing that we've really been looking out for the last few years.
Sure, and seeing a bit of it as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, usually it's been reported by tenants, but there have been times that we've noticed things upon inspection where we've thought suspect is going on here. So yeah, that's one thing that's been really big the last few years.
Okay, no problems. What are tenants usually home when you do these inspections? What would you say?
More often than not, tenants are home. Yeah.
Okay, they like to be there generally?
I guess so. I'm not a renter myself, but I probably would prefer to be home just for that peace of mind.
Sure.
Just, you never know, some agents give us a bad name. So I would prefer to be home. But yeah, they're more often than not, people are home.
They are home.
And you'd be surprised how many people are actually still asleep in bed when I arrive.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, and you've woken them up.
Yeah, there's a few knocks, a few calling out to the house thinking that everyone's
Look, it's happened to me. I've forgotten about inspection. Not being asleep, but just, that's right, you're coming today. Oh, God. And you look around the house and I haven't cleaned up. That's a question then for you. How important when you turn up for an inspection is that that the house is clean and tidy? It's not actually a prerequisite for you to tick off, is it? It's just that they're maintaining the property. Is that right?
Well, yeah. There's not a box to tick on the report that says tenant was awake upon entry. So it's not something we're really grading on.
Yep.
But it doesn't really affect it that much.
No.
We then go through, do our regular checks. Cleanliness varies from tenant to tenant. Some are under the impression they are a bit cleaner than what they are. But I think it's important to give them some kind of leeway as well. If there's a dish in the sink or next to the sink, I've seen people get in trouble for it before.
Really?
Yeah. I see a lot of stuff go viral on TikTok, and that's where a lot of agencies are getting in trouble when they've gypped people on their inspection, sent off the feedback to the tenant, and then the tenant showed the condition of the place. And
really?
Anything could be edited or changed in between all of that. There's so many factors, but I think given the way that the rental market is becoming so hard for tenants, there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms
Surely.
of, you know, maybe they didn't quite get the vacuum under the couch, or they didn't do all the dishes before I arrived, or the dishwasher's on so I can't check inside it. It just, things happen. So it's
sure.
more so trying to find that balance of being fair but also protecting the landlord's investment.
Sure. And in terms of finding things that need work, do you often turn up and find things and the tenant's even surprised that you've noticed it that they haven't?
Yeah, we do sometimes show up and find things that the tenant hasn't noticed.
Hasn't seen,
But
yep.
then again, that is a benefit of having the tenant there home for the inspection, because they can point out things that they've noticed going on. Half the time they'll point it out knowing full well it's not much to worry about, but it's something we can keep an eye on.
That you should be aware of.
Yeah,
Yep,
and
yep.
when they are home, if I do notice something, I can ask them to say, have you noticed this? Has this been an ongoing issue? Was this something that was done, like, was this like something that you've done yourself, or is it just shown up? And then that way we can investigate the issue a little further.
Okay, cool. And how often should inspections be conducted? How often do you do them at Sutherland's? Is there a set time frame?
So in terms of a set time frame, you can't do inspections more frequently than 3 months.
Okay, so that's the minimum.
That is the minimum, yes. It also depends on the fees that the landlord are paying. So for the people on a higher rate, we would do them more frequently.
Right.
But there are options and negotiations that usually Colleen works out with them just
Sure.
to determine how often they want to be done. There are some tenants that we prefer to keep a closer eye on, just in case, like if we've had issues in the
Sure,
past.
makes sense.
And then others I show up to every time, and everything's spick and span, nothing changes, nothing's gone wrong. So they're sort of easier ones that we can do less frequently if that's what the landlord is comfortable doing.
Sure. Okay, tricky question for you now. You turn up and you see a bit of tenant damage.
Yeah.
How do you handle a situation like that?
Well, the first thing to do is to find out how it happened. And so it can be an awkward conversation to have,
Would
but
be.
you've got, if the tenant's home, you've got to bring
have
them
it.
over and just say, hey, what's going on here? If they're not home, get them on the blower later on just to find out what went down. Yeah, it's not pleasant to have to do, and usually they're probably hoping that it's not noticed. But a lot of our tenants have been really great in terms of if they have damaged something themselves, they've come to us before we've even got to the property for the inspection to say, hey, look, we've got this issue, you know, this fell over and cracked a tile, or the door blew open in the wind and it's the handles popped a hole in the wall. And 9 times out of 10, they're on it in terms of repairing it themselves, or they're letting us get our people in that we...
Sorting out whatever needs
Yeah,
to
our
happen.
maintenance people come in to fix everything up. So it's awkward, and it's not pleasant to also have to tell the landlord, because they're not in the conversations, they're not there in person, they don't get to see it. So when they get the email or the call to say something's been damaged, they might freak out and be like, oh God, what's happened? What have they done? How much is it going to cost me? So it's sort of going between the two parties as well to make sure that no one's freaking out, no one's died, so that it's not the end of the world. It'll get fixed.
Sure.
Everything's fine.
All right. Now, I guess there's probably been times where you've discovered, let's call it evidence, where
Maybe once or twice.
where a tenant is maybe trying to hide something that they don't want you to find out about. I guess probably a common one might be an extra pet. Have we come across situations like this before?
Yes, I actually have. It's, you know, sometimes you'll find like a box of kitty litter and a scoop in the laundry or something.
But there's no cat on the lease.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that is a tricky one. Obviously, the legislation around having pets has changed recently, sort of going a bit more in the way of Victoria. They're very open to pets and trying to give renters like a fair chance to keep their pets, because often they've been with them for years and years and years, and you don't want to get rid of them. But landlords are then, on the flip side, wary about any damage or just degradation to the property, to things like carpet in particular, because that's where it can trap smells. It can get really dirty. If they aren't terribly clean pets, they could be getting pests or anything like that. So, yeah, there have been a couple times where I've noticed that there are pets, especially if you don't see anything like toys or food or anything, but then you sort of see behind the blinds or the curtains, there's like a build-up of fur. And again, it's another awkward chat to have, to say, hey, it looks like there might be a pet
So
here.
what? Let's just talk this through for a second. What you do find this, and you do have the chat. they're either going to deny or admit it. Let's just say they admit it. What then happens? Can you then talk it through with the landlord, be the go-between, and see whether they can get the? It's got to be one of two things, doesn't it? So either get rid of the cat or the cat goes onto the lease. Are they the only two outcomes? And how would you work that out?
Yeah, I mean, there is going down the route of breaching the tenant, which is, it's a bit more of a serious mark against their rental history and their tenancy record with us. And yeah, those kind of are the two options: is getting it on the lease or having to
breach.
Yeah,
which means they've got to get the pet out.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a pet owner myself, so it would be devastating to.
Would you usually go to the owner then and give them? Well, with that new...
Well, we want to start the conversation with the tenant because they're the ones with the pet, potentially. And the hard part about then going to the landlord to say they've got a pet, can we put it on the lease, is that we've already started the conversation with the dishonesty of having the pet there without
sneaking it in the first place.
And I know it's a common thing. I know of friends that have done it and they've told me, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna listen to that one. That's fine. That's
as long as we're not the property managers on that one.
That's your rickety bridge to walk, mate. That's not on me. But yeah, it is a hard go between. But it is like the tenancy laws have been changing to make renting with pets a lot easier. So now it's not really something landlords can say no to.
Sure.
And there's been mixed feedback on that. There are obviously landlords concerned about their property and the condition of it. And then there are other people who are pet owners who want to be able to keep their pets. So it depends on who you ask, whether it's a good thing or bad thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, can you finish us off with maybe have you got any funny stories? Have you got anything that's interesting that you've turned up at a property inspection and you've discovered that you just weren't expecting?
Yeah, I've seen some things.
I'm sure you have.
A number of, how you say, adult paraphernalia.
Sure.
Might have been left out, which I'm not here to judge.
No.
Maybe let's pop it in a drawer before I come round. Maybe
Might be a good idea.
Yeah, just in a cupboard somewhere. I'm not checking too diligently in people's wardrobes. So maybe just pop that away. I mean, sometimes you encounter the odd smell of illicit substances, which need to, perhaps be removed. Maybe not kept in a bedroom. So yeah, you do come
across these things.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, probably enough on that. But look, thanks so much for coming in, Lachlan, and providing
pleasure.
Such interesting information on conducting property inspections. It's something that all landlords and tenants would be interested to hear about and know a bit more about. And remember that regular and thorough inspections are critical to safeguarding your investment and fostering a positive relationship with your tenants. So for more tips and property management solutions, remember to visit Sutherland's Property Management Group's website, which is www.spmg.com.au. Now, thanks again for joining us today on the Property Investors Handbook podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes that's going to help you manage your property investment effectively. And Lockie, thanks for being our special guest in here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sure I'll be back one day.
Absolutely. More than welcome. Cheers.